Hello guys, welcome back to this YouTube channel. I'm starting a new series on Solidity and this is the first video on this series. In this video, we're building a simple Solidity smart contract and there'll be future videos where I explain in depth like the data types and everything concerning Solidity. So I'll be guiding you on how to be a Solidity developer through these videos and this series. And for the requirement for this series is not really much. I will make use of an online IDE, which means you don't need to set up anything or install any software or frameworks or anything to get started. Let's dive into this video. So what is Solidity? Solidity is an object-oriented high-level programming language used for creating smart contracts. What is a smart contract? A smart contract is a program that lives on the blockchain which runs when some condition are being met. So these are used to automate some kind of execution or agreement so that all parties involved are certain of the outcome. So once a condition is being met, this outcome is what is being produced. Solidity was influenced by C++ and Python and JavaScript. So if you know any of these languages, it will be a plus on your side to easily grasp this whole new language. Solidity is statically typed. It's statically typed. It supports inheritance, libraries, and user-defined types, among many other features. So we can see from here the kind of contracts we can create, like a voting contract, a crowdfunding contract, a multi-signature wallet, and so on. So without taking much time on this, we can proceed into writing Solidity codes, and you don't need to set up any software or download any software. So we make use of an online IDE, which is called Remix IDE for creating smart contracts. And I'll navigate to the website right now, link in the description below. While I wait for the page to load, let me just give you a rundown of what Remix IDE is. So this is basically like a code editor where you write your codes, but it's online. So you don't need to set up anything, just go to the site and you can start writing your code, and it helps you deploy to your blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain, the Binance blockchain, different blockchain of your choice. So yeah, now it's loaded. Now, as we can see in the environment of Remix, it supports the Solidity, it supports Viper, and it has some plugins. The Solidity environment is what we'll be using in this course since we are learning Solidity. Viper is another language based on Python for writing smart contracts, but we'll not go into that in this series. This series is mainly for Solidity. I'll close this home page, and as you can see here, this is where we write our code. This is the editor, and to the left here, this is where we have the file explorers where our files that we've created are listed. To the left, you can see some icons, and the first, which is open by default, is the file explorer. Then we have the Solidity compiler. This is where we select the version of Solidity we intend to use, the Solidity compiler rather, we intend to use, and set some parameters. Next is deploy and run transactions. So this is where we set our environment. Note, this environment is different from the environment we saw on the home page. So this lets us know where we are deploying our contracts to, and then we can see the accounts, which are the list of accounts that are available to us. And we can see the gas limits. This is where we set like the fuel the transaction needs. And we can see the value. This is when we're trying to send value or money into the smart contract. Don't worry, we'll talk about this in future videos. Now, if you go down, we can see the AT address, which is where we can load our contract if we've already deployed this contract. So if this contract already exists on the blockchain, we can load that transaction. And there you see deployed contract. This is where the list of our deployed contracts are present. So here we can interact with the contracts and call the functions on the contract and basically do whatever I want the contracts to do through this place. So just to go back to the environment, if I should click down on this, you can see we have the JavaScript VM, which is like a local blockchain running on Remix right now, and it gives us available addresses, which you can see, which we saw there. And then we have the injected web trail. What this does, it connects to our wallet. So you can connect to, I have MetaMask installed. So if I should select injected web trail, it connects to my MetaMask. But if you don't have MetaMask installed, you can't use this. So we have the web trail provider. This is where we connect directly to a node, and we can deploy to this node, which is a blockchain, and we can deploy to the blockchain and interact with the smart contract on that blockchain. Now we have three more icons here. We have the analytics and the plugin and other icons here. But the plugin is where we select the plugins we need for our Solidity, and the analytics just shows you how your contract is doing. But we're not going to that yet, since we'll not need it. Most times when you're coding on Remix IDE, you just make use of the first three, except you need to use a plugin and you have to go to the plugin to check if it's available. So with that out of the way, we'll go back to the file explorer so you can get used to the interface. And as you can see, we have the create new file icon. Next is the GitHub icon. This lets us publish our files in this workspace to GitHub. And lastly, we have the folder icon. This lets us load a Solidity file from our local machine up to Remix IDE. So now we have to create a new file. I'll click on the file icon and we get this pop-up. And the extension of a Solidity file is SOL, which is Solidity for short. And I'll name this file Hello World since that's the program we'll be writing in this video. The file gets open in our editor and we can see a new file created, hello world.so. So the first thing you want to do when you have a Solidity file is specify the Solidity version compiler to use. So we can do that by typing pragma solidity and the version name. I'll be using 0.6.8. Now you can see a little caret sign, I think that's what it's called, in front of this version number. What that tells Solidity is to use this specific version. So it won't use anything less, it won't use anything above this. It's use this very version, 0.6.8. Now I can also ask Solidity to use any version between the range of 0.4.24 to 0.6.8. So you can specify the versions you want or the version range you want through this first line of code. So I'll just undo this and go back to my 0.6.8, which is the current version as of the time of recording. Notice how we have a semicolon at the end of the line 1. This is because Solidity is a language where you need to end your statements with semicolons. So we've created the file, we've specified our Solidity compiler version. The next thing to do is to create the actual contract. So we can do that by writing contract, the keyword contract, and then we'll give this contract a name. I'll be calling this hello world, and we add our curly braces, which means we want to write things inside this contract. So now we can go on to create variables and create functions and everything. Don't worry, we'll go in depth into this specific topic in future videos. But right now, just think of variable as a container that holds a value. And because Solidity is a typed language, we need to specify the type of this variable. So the type of this variable will be a string, which is basically text. And the name I'll give this will be greeting. And I will end this line with a semicolon, which means I'm done on this line. And because I did not specify any value to give to greeting variable, by default, it takes an empty string. It takes the default of the data type. And the default of data type string is an empty letter, so just empty string. If I was using a number here, the default would be 0. And if I'm using a boolean, which is a true or false data type, the default will be false. Next, I'm going to create a getter and a setter for this variable. So a getter is a function that gets the value, and a setter is a function that sets the value of greetings. First I'll do here is to create the getter function. Creating a function in Solidity is not that complicated. And if you don't understand this, don't worry, I have a dedicated video on functions. So to create a function, we just have to write the keyword function, and we have to give this function a name. So I'll call this get, and in the braces we can specify the parameters. So if this function should take some arguments, this is where we specify them. But this function doesn't take an argument, so it stays empty. And now we have to specify the visibility. I'll give this a public, and we have to specify the type of function, which can either be pure or view function. And again, I have a video on this, so we don't need to talk about it here. Just know that view function tells the contract that this function doesn't write to the contract. It doesn't change or modify in the state. All it does is read from the smart contract, which is what we want to do in this case once we read the greeting variable. And then we can return a variable. So we can do the by writing returns, and in the parentheses, we can specify the type we are returning. And since greeting is a string, it's fair to return a string. So we specify a string and give it a storage type of memory. And I'll discuss about memories in future videos. Just like we did in the contract, we have to add curly braces. This is where we write the function definition or what the function contains. This function isn't complicated. All we want to do is return the greeting variable. So we just write return greeting and we'll end it with our semicolon. As you can see, on line 6, we use the word returns, but on line 7, we use the word return. So line 6 tells the Solidity, the compiler, that get function returns a string. Then line 7 tells the function what to actually return. So we are returning the greeting variable. And congrats, you just created your first Solidity function. So now we create a second function, which will be the setter, to set the greeting variable. We would follow the same convention with the get function. So I'll call this set, but the plot here is that the set takes a value. So having a string and give it a storage memory, and I have to give it a name. So the name of the string, which I will call greet with an underscore. So whatever the user passes gets stored in greet. And I'll give it a visibility type of public, which means anyone can call this function. And since this is a setter, we are not returning any value, and we are writing to the smart contract, so we don't need to specify the view. We use our curly braces so we can write the body of this function. In the body of set, all we need to do is assign the underscore greet to the variable greeting, which is outside. So I'll just do greeting equal underscore greet. So far, everything looks good. But remember, greeting by default on initialization, it's empty string. We would like a way to set the default value for greetings. So which brings us to constructors. Constructors are basically the first function that automatically runs when you deploy a smart contract. Luckily, creating a constructor is way easier than creating a function. So we just do constructor and we have our braces. In these braces, we can accept some parameters that will set the visibility, which would be public, and we'll put our curly braces so that we can write the body of this constructor. In this case, I will not be accepting values from the user. I will just set greetings to a hard-coded value, which is hello world, and I will end this line with a semicolon as usual. Now we need to compile this code so we can deploy it. So we compile the code, the compiler works through this code and find any error in the code and let us know about it. So if you go to the compile tab, you can click the compile button. But as you can see, I have auto compile checked, which means whenever I make changes, Solidity automatically compiles the code for me. And it's good to use that feature because if not, you have to come over here, click compile. Now we'll go to the deploy tab so we can deploy the smart contract. Back at the deploy tab, we have the environment, which will leave at JavaScript VM, which is the local node running on Remix IDE. Then we have these generated accounts, which have ethers in them. So ethers are Ethereum. So on every transaction, you're paying a fee. Just think of fees as where. Well, we'll talk about this in future videos. And we can select the gas limit. We'll leave this as the default. And now we have to select the contract. In our case, we only have one contract, which is why we only see one contract in the dropdown, which is a hello world contract. Now we click on deploy. As you can see, the contract appears down so we can interact with this contract. And expanding this contract, we can see we have the get function and we have the set function. Now the greeting variable doesn't appear here. That's because I never specified a visibility for the greeting variable. And Solidity automatically gave it a private type, which means no one outside the smart contract can access it. But since we have our functions in the smart contract, we'll be able to get this value and also set this value. If everything goes as planned, hitting the get function should be able to get our greeting variable, which by default it's hello world because we set this in the constructor. So I'll hit the get function and we should be able to get hello world, which we got here, which means the code works. Now let's see if our set function works. So I have to specify what the text, the new text I'm giving this greeting variable. And I'll type in hello human and I click on set. And let's try getting this variable again. And if I hit get, I should see hello human. I don't know if any of you noticed, but whenever we hit a function or we call a function, we'll see a new log being logged at this lower right of the web page. Think of a smart contract as a website. So every function lives on this website and they are requests. So once you hit the get, you're sending a request to the smart contract. Which is why whenever we hit any of the functions, we see a new log generated. This is the receipt of the request of the call. So if we should check this, we can see get was called on the hello world smart contract. And we can see the value, we can see the transaction hash, we can see who sent this transaction. So basically, this is the receipt of the very transaction that was called. And this transaction is stored on the blockchain, which means in the future, you can go back to this very transaction using the transaction hash and see what exactly happened at what point in time. Congratulations, you just created your very first smart contract. You can go tell your friends that you're a smart contract developer. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, hit the subscribe button and like this video and also share it to people who you think might find it helpful. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in future videos.